major international airports: Miami, Fort Lauderdale, Hollywood, Orlando, and Tampa. Palm Beach and St. Pete Clearwater International are also important airports in the national airspace system. In addition, Florida has a significant number of general aviation airports. You get the picture. Florida is one of the busiest states for aviation in the United States. The South Central Florida Metroplex is the FAA's plan to modernize air traffic procedures for 21 airports in the southern half of Florida. Many of the existing procedures are based on outdated technology. While safe, these procedures are less precise and efficient than those based on satellite technology. The satellite-based routes proposed for the Metroplex project will enhance safety and efficiency across the region. Metroplex will benefit passengers by creating more direct routes, decrease congestion at airports and in the air, improve air traffic flows, enhancing safety and efficiency, and reduce complexity and communication for air traffic controllers and pilots, making the system safer. Before we can change procedures, the National Environmental Policy Act, or NEPA, requires us to conduct an environmental assessment to determine the potential impacts of the proposed procedures. One purpose of NEPA is to ensure that proposals, alternatives, and environmental impacts of projects are fully disclosed to the public. That's why we're here today. On May 11th, the FAA posted the Draft Environmental Assessment, or EA, for the Metroplex, and we opened a 60-day public comment period that closes on July 10th. We hope that you will consider submitting comments about the document. On this website, you can click the Comments tab, and it will show you how to submit your comments. It provides email addresses and a physical address where you can send comments after the workshop. Be sure to get your comments in before the July 10th deadline. After the comment period closes, we will review and consider all substantive comments received during the comment period as we develop the environmental determination. We expect to issue the determination by September 30th, 2020. A note about the draft EA. The FAA identified inadvertent errors related to runway designations for Orlando, Tampa, and St. Pete Clearwater International Airports. We updated the document on May 13th, and it's posted at metroplexenvironmental.com. I'd like to cover 3 procedural items before we start. First, if you're having technical issues, you can text us anytime during the workshop at 949-478-0253 or click the Technical Support tab on this webpage. Second, the workshop will last 90 minutes. We are recording the workshop and it will be posted on this website tomorrow for you to review. You can share the link with friends and neighbors who are unable to participate today. And finally, we have experts available to answer questions about the draft EA and the proposed air traffic control procedures. FAA air traffic controllers, environmental specialists, and industry representatives will answer your questions after the presentation. As a reminder, the questions asked and answers provided here are not part of the official record for the draft EA. To comment for the official record, click on the Comments tab on this website. That will link you to the FAA's official comment page for this project. Now, Lisa Favors, an environmental specialist for the FAA's Air Traffic Organization, will brief us on the draft environmental assessment.
Thank you, Michael. I will explain the draft EA for the South Central Florida Metroplex. As mentioned earlier, we developed the document in accordance with NEPA, which requires us first to identify the purpose and need for the project. In this case, the purpose and need addresses the current inefficient arrival and departure procedures for airports in South Central Florida. Many of the existing procedures are based on outdated technology and are less precise and efficient than satellite procedures. We need to fix that. The draft EA identifies causes for inefficiency as lack of predictable routes or procedures to transition aircraft between airport runways and high altitude en route airspace. Complex interactions between converging routes and lack of flexibility for air traffic controllers as they transition flights between high altitude and low altitude airspace. By adopting new procedures, which the draft EA calls the proposed action, we expect reduced workload due to fewer controller-pilot communications, more efficient operations due to decreased complexity, and fewer flight segments resulting in more predictable traffic flows. A detailed explanation of the purpose and need is included in Chapter 2 of the draft EA. The draft EA analyzes potential environmental impacts from the proposed action and the no action alternative. It is important to note that we analyzed many additional procedures, but they not carried forward for detailed study in the draft EA because they did not meet the purpose and need or applicable safety standards. Under no action, procedures in place from June 2017 to May 2018 would remain except for planned modifications that are independent of the Metroplex. Our analysis determined that only the proposed action would meet the purpose and need for the project. The no action alternative would not meet the purpose and need, but it was included in the draft EA as required by Council on Environmental Quality Regulations. The alternatives are described in Chapter 3 of the draft EA. Affected environment describes the human, physical, and natural environmental conditions that the proposed action could affect. The affected environment is described in detail in Chapter 4 of the draft EA. The draft EA considers the effects on 14 environmental resource categories and their subcategories identified in FAA guidance. We evaluated the alternatives under conditions forecasted for 2021, the first year the proposed action could be implemented, and under the 2026 forecasted conditions. The evaluation considers the direct, indirect, and cumulative effects of the proposed action and no action alternatives. The draft EA determined that neither the proposed action nor the no action alternatives are likely to cause significant environmental impacts to any of the environmental resource categories. For more information, you can review Chapter 5 in the draft EA. The rest of my discussion will focus on the noise analysis since you, the public, expressed most interest in that. However, feel free to ask questions about any category during the Q&A session later in the workshop. First, I will explain how we measure noise. The FAA measures aviation noise using the day-night average sound level, DNL, metric. DNL represents noise as it occurs over a 24-hour period, with nighttime noise weighted more heavily than daytime noise. DNL is the standard noise metric used for studies of aviation noise exposure in communities. To account for differences in how people respond to noise, we use the A-weighted scale, DBA. This scale closely approximates the volume of sound as perceived by the human ear. The FAA considers aircraft noise exposure of 65 dNL in residential areas and noise increases of dNL 1.5 dB or more for noise-sensitive areas exposed to noise at or above the dNL 65 dB noise exposure level to be significant. The noise analysis demonstrates that the proposed action would not result in significant noise increases. More information about how the FAA measures noise is in Appendix E of the draft EA, and a detailed noise analysis can be found in Appendix I. Before I end, the following video will show you how to look up noise information for your address. You may search more than 122,000 grid points of noise data in the study area, presented in decibels, abbreviated as dB. The grid points are U.S. Census population points located at 1/2 nautical mile intervals across the entire study area. The map opens to the study area. In the search bar, start typing your address and similar addresses will pop up. Click on the correct address and you will see a light blue map pin. The map shows the model grid points in blue. Click on each point to see a pop-up with noise analysis results. The map shows data including dNL calculated for the alternatives and the change in noise when the proposed action is compared to the no action alternative. Now our air traffic control expert will brief you on some of the more significant procedures the Metroplex proposes for your area.
Hello, my name is Rick, and I'm an air traffic controller who works at the FAA's Miami International Air Traffic Control Tower and Radar Approach Control. In this section of the website, we will walk you through the flight procedure poster boards for Miami International Airport, Miami Opa-locka Executive Airport, and Miami Executive Airport. Each of the following boards shows a sampling of existing flight tracks and the proposed new flight procedures for jet aircraft. Each board will show either arrival or departure aircraft with current day tracks color-coded via altitude. The flight tracks and proposed procedures are all overlaid on a map of the surrounding area. Each flight procedure board is oriented with north facing up. The name of the airport and the name of the flight procedures are in the box on the upper right corner. This box also shows the type of operation, either arrival or departure, and the direction of flight, which we call flow, either north, south, east, or west. Flow is related to the layout of the airport's runways. At Miami, there is east flow and west flow. There are 4 runways at Miami, 3 parallel runways oriented east to west, and the 4th runway that is oriented northwest to southeast. For example, east flow includes 4 runways that allow aircraft to land and depart east and southeast bound. On an east flow, runways 9 and 12 are the primary runways for arrivals. Runways 8 left and 8 right are the primary departure runways. When in west flow, the runways used are runway 26 left, 26 right, runway 27, and runway 30. These runways allow the aircraft to land and depart westbound over the land. Miami Opa-locka Airport and Miami Executive Airport also have runways in the same orientation. For each of the 3 airports, east flow is a more common flow of air traffic, with aircraft arriving over land and taking off east towards the ocean. A few acronyms are used on the boards. A standard instrument departure, or SID, is a departure. A standard terminal arrival, or STAR, is an arrival. Area navigation, or RNAV, is a term for modern satellite-based navigation technology used in the proposed procedures. The spelling of each arrival or departure procedure is limited to 5 letters. For example, the spelling of the BNGOS departure is pronounced bongos. The stars on the board are locations of waypoints, which are fixed navigational points in space that aircraft fly to. Just as the spelling of procedures, waypoints are spelled with 5 letters. For example, the CSALT waypoint would be pronounced CSALT. The proposed flight procedures are colored purple for departures and orange for arrivals. These colored flight paths show the intended flight paths in the future for most flights using the new procedures. Surrounding the flight paths are dispersed path areas in either pink for departures or yellow for arrivals. These areas show the possible locations where aircraft may fly in the future and account for the possibility of different routing to avoid hazardous weather for operational need or for safety. The existing flight tracks are shown on the legend by color, starting from the lowest altitude in pink, then blue, then teal, and then the highest altitudes are in green. Here are examples of departure flight tracks at Miami International Airport to the east. Notice the colors changing and the respective altitudes associated with the colors. The flight tracks shown are a sample of jet aircraft operations, which are from March to April 2018 for Miami International during the daytime, which does not include nighttime hours between 11 p.m. and 6 a.m. The bullet points on the right side provide additional details about the procedures. Next, we'll take a look at a few arrival and departure boards for these airports. This procedure board is for Miami International Airport East Flow departures. There are 10 proposed departure procedures that would be used when the airport is on an east flow. The bongos, glades, colada, vacay, foals, guava, mojito, noche, arps, and twister. This is the most common direction of air traffic flow at Miami International. There are 5 departures to the west and north called glades, bongos, twister, vacay, and arps. For airplanes that depart to the south and southeast, there are 5 departures called mojito, noche, guava, colada, and foals. Aircraft from Miami using the twister and arps procedures would initially depart navigating along the procedure and then would be given a navigational heading to follow called a vector by the air traffic controller. These are shown in a lighter shade of purple. The noche departure procedure is used for nighttime operations between the hours of 11 p.m. and 7 a.m. Air traffic controllers may direct aircraft away from the procedure to avoid hazardous weather for operational need or for safety. This flight procedure board for Miami International Airport is for east flow departures and shows a zoomed in view of the 9 departure procedures. This zoomed in view shows the vacay, bongos, glades, twister, and arps procedures initially turning to the north, the foals, colada, and noche procedures turning to the southeast, and guava and mojito turning to the south. This flight procedure board is for west flow departures at Miami International Airport. There are 10 proposed departure procedures: the bongos, glades, colada, vacay, foals, guava, mojito, noche, arps, and twister. This is a less common direction of air traffic flow at Miami International. There are 4 departures used for northbound destinations called the bongos, twister, vacay, and arps. For airplanes with destinations to the south, there are 2 departure procedures called the mojito and guava. Aircraft flying to the west that are routed over the Gulf of Mexico use the glades departure. The pink dotted line is for aircraft departing runway 30. This runway is used as a contingency departure runway when all other runways are unavailable. The ARPS procedure is also used by departures at Fort Lauderdale, which are shown in light purple lines. West flow departures from Miami join the ARPS departure procedure near Boca Raton, generally an altitude at or above 13,000 feet. The twister is also used by Fort Lauderdale. Aircraft from Miami merge onto the twister departure near the South Florida Wildlife Management Area, generally an altitude at or above 13,000 feet. This flight procedure board is for east flow arrivals at Miami International Airport. There are 5 proposed arrivals: the Coastal, Doral, Heron, Largo, and Vice. Aircraft coming from the west, north, and northwest typically land on runway 12. These arrivals would use the Doral, Coastal, and Heron procedures. Aircraft coming from the south, southeast, and east land on the south runway, which is runway 9, and would use the Largo, Vice, and Heron arrivals. Arriving aircraft are either given vectors to follow by air traffic control or use the procedure as published. For example, aircraft arriving from the north may land on runway 12 using the coastal arrival procedure. This flight procedure board for Miami International Airport is for West Flow arrivals. There are 5 proposed arrival procedures: the Heron, Doral, Largo, Coastal, and Vice. As you can see, the proposed procedures mimic current day flight tracks airplanes fly today. Aircraft coming from the north and west typically land on the parallel runways 26 right or 26 left. These arrivals would use the Coastal, Doral, and Heron arrivals. Aircrafts coming from the west, south, and southeast would land on either runway 27 or runway 30 using the Vice, Largo, and Heron arrival procedures. This flight procedure board shows all proposed Miami International Airport East Flow procedures, including the 10 departure procedures and the 5 arrival procedures. For East Flow procedures, departures shown in purple are given a navigational heading to follow to join the departure procedures. Aircraft arriving to the Miami area on routes shown in orange will fly on the proposed procedure until the air traffic controller issues a heading to guide the pilot to land. The 2 procedures in light purple are also used by Fort Lauderdale. The Noche departure is used during nighttime hours between 11 p.m. and 7 a.m. This flight procedure board shows all proposed Miami International Airport West Flow procedures, including the 10 departure procedures and the 5 arrival procedures. The dotted pink line is for departures that use runway 30, which is rarely used.
All right, good afternoon. Welcome to the Miami workshop for the South Central Florida Metroplex. This is our Q&A session this afternoon. I'm Michael O'Hara, the Regional Administrator for the FAA Southern Region, and I'm joined by several technical experts, including Luis and Rick, air traffic controllers from the Miami International Air Traffic Control Tower and the Radar Approach Control, Lisa Favors, FAA Environmental Specialist, several others from the FAA, as well as airport, airline, and other industry representatives. So Eddie and Luis are also available to help with any needed Spanish translation if that's preferable to anybody who's asking us questions. As a reminder, we're holding this workshop to answer your questions this afternoon about the Metroplex project. We're unable to answer questions about other topics in this workshop. We're asking that you submit questions to us today on the South Central Florida Metroplex in the Q&A box on Zoom or Facebook or YouTube, where we're streaming live, or you can text your question to us at 949-478-0253. That number to text again is 949-478-0253. If you need technical assistance during the workshop, please click on the technical support tab on our website. And I'll turn it over to Luis for just a moment.
Recordamos que pueden someter sus preguntas vía redes sociales como Facebook, YouTube, a través de Zoom, o nos pueden enviar texto al número 949-478-0253. Una vez más, 949-478-0253.
Thank you, Luis, and thanks again, everyone, for joining us. I'm going to jump right in. We have our first question. Why isn't the FAA holding public meetings on the Metroplex? All right, so this virtual workshop is actually a public meeting. We've had great turnout. This is the 6th of our workshops that we're holding the first 2 weeks of June. We're holding 12 total, and we're sharing information with the public. We're expecting everybody to experience the same type of information flow that you have in an in-person workshop. You can see the team that we have gathered here, and we're ready for your questions. We can't hold in-person workshops at this time because public health officials have recommended social distancing. They're advising against large gatherings that we typically see in these workshops. And many of the venues in Florida that we would often use for a workshop like this are closed due to some of the ongoing concerns. Looking back, we had 17 workshops last year. There were 729 attendees in those workshops. We received about 170 comments in total. I think 142 of those attendees were in Miami, and 26 comments came in our workshops in Miami. little over 1,000 comments total throughout the project, and 287 of those were in Miami. So again, we welcome your comments. We welcome your questions today. And I'll just pause for a moment because I want to be clear right up front that questions that are asked today are not part of the official record for the project. So if you have comments you want to submit to the FAA, you're going to want to go back to our website, floridametroplexworkshops.com, and there's a comments tab that you can click on under any of the cities there, and you can submit a comment there, or you'll see the addresses you can use to send those to us by email, or even if you want to drop one in the regular mail to us. But that would be an official record, official comments that you send to us. All right, I'm looking back. I think we've got that one covered. So the next question we have, will the new procedures increase the noise generated from aircraft? Lisa, I'd like to ask for your help with that.
Sure, Michael. The FAA's environmental analysis for the project looked at more than 210,000 U.S. Census block from the year 2010, and we use the year 2010 because that was the best available information at the time, the newest information at that time. So we use that information, and within those areas, it determined that model noise levels at more than 117,000 points. It showed that the proposed procedure would not result in any significant or reportable noise increases under FAA criteria. Thanks, Michael.
All right, great. Thanks, Lisa. Okay, we'll continue. You may want to show one of the procedure boards on this one. The Noche procedure looks just like a couple of these other procedures and wasn't there during the last meetings. Why can't they all just be on the Noche?
Michael, I will
Yes.
help with this one. The Noche departure procedure, it's a noise abatement procedure that will only be used during the times of 11 p.m. and 7 a.m. During this time, the procedure of Mojito, Guava, and Colada will discontinue the use of that, and they will only use the procedure Noche, and this is for jet departures departing Miami to the south and southeast destinations.
All right, Luis, thank you. All right, we have a question. There are a lot of airplanes over the Everglades. Did we study the environmental impacts of those? Lisa, I may come back to you on that.
I can take that. Do you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Sure. Yes. The short answer is yes. The draft environmental document considered all direct, indirect, and cumulative impacts over the entire study area, which encompasses the Everglades. And it's important to note we are currently in consultation with the National Park Service to ensure that we are compliant in looking at those sensitive areas. We recognize that's a sensitive area and we are in constant consultation with them. If you would like to see the information that we have gathered thus far, you can look in the draft environmental document, and you can find that document on our website, which is metroplexenvironmental.com. And then once you're there, you click on South Central Florida Metroplex, and you can find that document there. And generally, you can find a discussion in the affected environment section, which is chapter 4, and chapter 5 talks about the environmental consequences. So I think that covers that question. Thanks, Michael.
Okay, thanks, Lisa. And I'll just ask, is there any input, Luis or Rick, about what this project may mean in terms of the Everglades? In terms of, I guess, are we changing flights or routes in that area, Luis?
There's one new procedure called the Glades. It's going to be departing basically directly to the west on a west operation, and north and then west on an east operation. This is for traffic that's going to be routed over the Gulf of Mexico. And we anticipate all this departure to be 7,000 feet or higher when they go over the Everglades.
Okay, great. Thank you both. Okay, we have a question. Can you tell us about the flight paths off of runways 8 right and 8 left? Rick, I'll ask you your help on that. And we can pull up some procedure boards on that.
Sure, I'll attempt to answer that question. When it comes to the designs, all of our departure and arrival procedures were designed actually to all the runways. And we did our best to mirror the current traffic patterns that exist today. In addition, some of the changes that we have made were actually from public comment from the previous workshop. And if we're able to amend these again, we will do so based on the comments if we are able to amend the procedures.
All right. Thanks, Rick. Feel like we're rolling through these. We have another question on easterly takeoffs routing north under the next gen plan, or I guess Metroplex. Will you continue to grant vector routes that fly aircraft over densely populated low income areas? All right.
I guess I could try to answer that question.
I'm reading the questions the way they come in. I'm sorry to interrupt, Rick. I just wanted to share that. So if you could provide some insights on that.
It's okay. So today, the air traffic controller determines when the aircraft will turn to the north with the vector. And if we want to pull up a Miami East departure board, it might be able to show kind of what I'm talking about. Generally, this occurs today at around 5 miles east of the airport, with the anticipation that the vector will put the airplane over the bay. However, not all aircraft perform the same, and some airplanes turn to the north at a faster rate than others. However, we're moving to satellite-based technology, and with these RNAV off-the-ground procedures, these aircraft, for the most part, should turn over the middle of the bay. The turn was, I believe, designed roughly 6 to 7 miles east of the airport and should provide that the aircraft turns over the middle of the bay. The only time we will be using vectors is if there's thunderstorms or for safety reasons. That's the only time I envision that we're going to be not be using these procedures. So for the most part, these aircraft should be turning over the middle of the bay.
Right, Rick. And I know we have that graphic up. I think there's an east flow close view that may show that, may depict that a little bit closer.
Right, Michael, if there we go. If we can get that. And Ricky, do you mind if I jump in for a second?
Go ahead, Jim.
I do not mind, Jim. Go ahead.
Okay, this project is just a study in cooperation and collaboration, with the airport, with the airlines, with air traffic. One of the things that I think that we can be especially proud of is the work that we've done here to listen to the community, to listen to the airport, and to make adjustments to these procedures. So I want to highlight a couple of those areas. One, on this east flow, it's returning the procedures to the traditional noise abatement track off of the airport. So that's number one thing, the number one thing. When we talk about turning up Biscayne Bay and the placement of those waypoints, sea salt and deals further to the north, those are also things that we did in concert with the airports that are going to bring relief. Those ideally will be flying those tracks as published, and all of the track that you see to the right or the left of that purple track going to the north up Biscayne Bay, that dispersion should be tightened up over that track that's over water. So that's a key benefit. The straight out departures over Miami Beach directly to the east, you don't see any procedure out in that area. In fact, you'll see that we've designed a procedure that goes out over Virginia Key, over the power plant, to remove traffic from that area to the east. the night noise abatement, the noche, that this team bent over backwards to try and provide those benefits, and not just eastbound. I know, you know, the west flow procedures also trying to return that track to the point where it was south of 41st Street and over more industrial areas. This project is really a study in trying to make sure that we do the right thing with the community, with the airport. And, you know, that I think that when you take it all in, it's not perfect for everybody. One of the areas I want to highlight, and I'm going to ask Lisa to comment on this one, is looking at the economically disadvantaged areas, socioeconomic disadvantaged areas. If I'm not mistaken, Lisa, don't we assess that as part of the environmental assessment?
Yes, we do. We assess that. And as a result of that, we don't have any, the results show no impacts to any of those areas. So, and you can find information on that study. There's a section in the environmental document, in the draft document. I want to believe it's in section 4 of that document. And there's information there about the affected environment. But it's important to note, we don't, there are no changes. There are no impacts to those areas. So we don't have any mitigation available for that.
All right, Lisa, Jim, Rick, thanks for the tag team on that one.
Michael, if I may just chime in.
Yes, Virginia, please.
Yes, this is Virginia with American Airlines. And Jim, thank you for pointing that out about the excellent collaboration here in Miami. American Airlines, prior to the coronavirus, we have over 13,000 employees here. We still do. We operated over 350 flights out of Miami Airport. So, and we've been here for over 30 years. So, Jim, thank you for that. There's no greater team that we think to work with and enjoy than working with the team from Miami-Dade County Aviation. And I know some of them are on this workshop, and I want to thank them for that. And, you know, we believe and we are proud to be active members of the communities that we serve. And this process has allowed us to do that from every angle, working with our airport partners and the FAA. Thank you, Jim, and thank you, Michael, for that.
This is Mike. This is Rob from Delta. Can I jump in real quick?
You can, Rob. Go ahead, please.
Absolutely. I just wanted to kind of echo the prior statements. You know, this is really a team sport, and this program has really brought all the stakeholders together. You know, to produce a good product. You know, from our perspective, you know, the benefits are in a couple different buckets. Obviously, safety is a big piece. You know, the predictable paths as well as the vertical and horizontal guidance to the runways is very important. Efficiency, reduce fuel burn from the shorter routes and the optimized profile descents. We get fuel savings from that, but we also get traffic management improvements as well. Throughput to the airport, which equates to less holding and less vectors. And finally, there is the environmental benefits. Every time we burn less gas, that also means we burn or we emit less CO2. So that's very important to our communities. And finally, there's the noise, the ability to route around certain areas and use this technology. I mean, it's a win for everybody. And I'll just close in saying that it's a real pleasure to work with all the stakeholders, including the community. So thank you.
Rob, Virginia, thank you for adding on there. Appreciate the comments. I'm going to move to the next question. I may just keep this one. There was a question, I guess, earlier, can the slides be kept on longer so we can read them? I wonder if that was maybe during the intro. So I'll just remind everybody that all of the graphics that you've seen that we're accessing here can be pulled up and studied further if you want. If you go back to the www.floridametroplexworkshops website. You can click on the Miami link and you can see videos from air traffic control. I think you can see some of the overview and welcome videos. You have access to a noise analysis tool, and you can see the graphics, including the environmental graphics, as well as the air traffic control procedure boards. And take a look at those full screen, just pull those up and take a look further if you want. So hopefully that's helpful if there's a particular area that you want to look at. And of course, as we have questions and questions during the workshop, we'll continue to pull those up as well. All right, we have another question here. What stage are you in this program? Are these the final designs, and can we still comment? Jim, do you want to help with that?
Certainly, Michael, I'm happy to take that one on. We are still in what we call the evaluation phase. We are still accepting comments. That's the purpose of this workshop. These are our proposed final designs, but it is possible that we could make changes based upon the input that we get. So we encourage everybody to keep those cards and letters coming. Give us your comments online so that we can assess how we're doing. We recognize sometimes that we miss something, and we can make improvements. So please continue to do that. The designs will not be final until after we issue the final environmental assessment, and then the agency's decision on the project will come after that in what we call the record of decision, and that will be the official agency decision on the project. So we're still several months away from being at that point.
All right, thanks, Jim. And I'll remind everybody the comment period's open until July 10th. So you can use the Florida Metroplex workshops link, and you can click on the comments tab to submit those up until and including July 10th. Jim, forgive me if I missed this when you said it, but the earliest that we would implement new procedures would be spring, summer timeframe of 2021.
Oh, that's correct. After the record of decision, then we move into what we call the implementation phase, where we start setting the system up to implement the procedures, and that wouldn't take place until next spring.
All right.
Timeframe.
Thanks, Jim. All right, looks like we may have a two-part question here. Will Morningside see more flights overhead or less as a result of this plan once it's implemented? And where is the noise map that was just referenced? So Lisa, I may come to you. You may have some answers on that, but we'll probably need to see where that area is and help you out a little bit. So I think, do we want to pull the tool up?
Sure, I can talk through the tool. I'm not sure where Morningside area is, but the second part of that question they wanted to know where the noise map is that we just referenced. Okay, if you the website that you came into, which is Florida Metroplex workshops.com. Once you get to that website, if you on the bar near the top of the screen, if you click on noise tool on that bar, it will bring up this page that you're looking at right now. And on this page, it's you can search more than 122,000 grid points of noise data across the study area. You can the points are probably 1/2 nautical mile. Those census data points, population points that I talked about before, those points are located 1/2 nautical mile intervals across this entire study area. So the Morningside area, I'm not sure where that is, but once you visit this website and go to this tool, you can search in the search bar by typing an address that you're interested in, and it will pull up similar addresses, and you just click on the one that you're interested in. And once you get that, it'll have a little light blue map pin available, and you can verify your address. And then the blue circles all around
that address, and you find the nearest one close to you, and you can click on a point and see the noise analysis results. The map shows the data in DNL, and it's calculated for the alternatives, the change in noise, and it also shows the change in noise for the proposed action, and or the project that we're talking about now. All the procedures in this project is the proposed action, and the no action alternative. That's if we do nothing. You can see what that change in noise is on this map. So it's a really useful tool. It's available for you on that website, and you're welcome to visit it after this workshop and throughout, as long as this website is available throughout the comment period. Search around, type any address in, and it gives that same information for any of those addresses. I don't know if anyone from air traffic can speak specifically to what's happening at the in the Morningside area.
Okay. So Lisa, I'll just jump in real quick. So the
Okay.
dot that they clicked in that Morningside area, which west side of the bay, just north of 195, but you could see the numbers in there were very small. The differences, 0.01, maybe a little negative, maybe a little positive, but very, very minor changes. So that part of the analysis doesn't show any significant impact there. But I'll ask air traffic control in that area for the east departures. Is there anything that you have to add to?
Michael,
I'll take that.
go ahead, Rick.
So with the new Metroplex procedures that were designed for the north departures off Miami on the east flow, the aircraft should now be turning over the bay. So I don't believe Morningside will be getting as many aircraft overhead if these aircraft are on the procedure. Now, if there's a thunderstorm in the middle of the way in the airport and we have to give aircraft headings farther to the north, then Morningside might get aircraft overhead. But using the Metroplex procedures, Morningside should get less overhead aircraft going over that area.
Great, thank you, Lisa. Appreciate the explanation. Okay, we have a question. Can you explain some of the factors that you considered in designing the new arrival and departure paths for Miami?
I'll take that one.
Okay,
so the procedures were designed with current traffic in mind. Currently, the departures to the north from Miami are the same departures that currently travel that direction, with one exception, which is the westbound SID that Lewis was speaking about earlier, called the Glades departure, that routes these aircraft over the Gulf of Mexico. Now, the arrivals from the Northeast were changed to cross from the ocean at a point to keep them over the bay as long as possible.
Okay, thanks, Rick. I know that's some of the specifics there. Obviously, there are a lot of airports in South Florida, and there's a lot of interaction. It's very complex airspace. And there's also connectivity between those airports and other parts of the country, whether it's the Northeast corridor up in New York or out west in the US or even the Caribbean. So we have to have connectivity between all those airports, make sure that we're safely separating the procedures in and out, not only for Miami, but the satellite airports within the Miami area, and then thinking of Fort Lauderdale, not all that far away. There's 6 or 7 airports in a span of 35 miles or so in the South Florida area.
Michael, if I could also add that we use input from previous workshops, and also we collaborated with Miami-Dade Aviation Department in the design of most of this departure and arrival procedures. So that was also a factor that was taken into consideration.
Okay, Luis, thank you. Okay, we have a question. The ultimate goal of the Metroplex project is to increase inbound and outbound capacity in order to keep up with projected growth, correct? Question mark.
I'm ready, coach. Put me in.
Let's see. Is the ultimate
Do you mind
goal?
if I take that one?
Yeah, is the ultimate goal of the project to increase capacity to keep up with projected growth? Maybe that's a better way of phrasing it, Jim. So sure,
Okay.
why don't you take that?
Okay, and that is not the ultimate goal of the project. The purpose and need of the project are defined in the environmental assessment. So it's to enhance safety and the operational efficiency of the procedures. And we identify in the environmental assessment. I am not an environmental specialist, but I know one who's very close to me. That we address a number of structural issues that we believe will resolve the operational efficiency and the safety in the project. Now we know we have the safest air traffic control system in the entire world, but that doesn't mean that we can't make improvements to it. And as you stated in the comments to the previous question, that it's not just Miami, it's not just Fort Lauderdale, it's up through the Northeast Corridor. We're talking about the entire national airspace system is what we're concerned about. So we are modernizing a number of aspects of the national airspace system. Of course, the key enabler of some of that modernization is the PBN, or performance-based navigation procedures, that we implement. There are other aspects to that next gen comment. Things like the data communications upgrades that we're making, our ability to digitally transmit clearances to the flight deck before they leave the gate. We're making changes to the air traffic automation system en route so that we can do the same types of thing. We can digitally transmit clearances, and then that helps us to reduce the communications between the flight deck and air traffic control. That's a safety enhancement, a significant safety enhancement that I can tell you that we have measured in other projects by cutting down on that communications. We've implemented, kind of invisible to the people here in the local area, we've implemented some changes in the high altitude structure. We call it the en route airways, from Florida down into the Caribbean, up to the Northeast Corridor, and across the entire country. So these procedures provide on-ramps and off-ramps, if you will, to those enhanced en route procedures, and it helps us bring a measure of predictability to the entire air transportation system, to the National Airspace System, the NAS, and that lets us move from our current way of doing business into a trajectory-based world where we can predict where aircraft are going to be before they even leave the gate. So it's not about increasing inbound and outbound capacity. It's about increasing the efficiency of the entire system. The separation rules don't change here. So air traffic is going to apply the same rules. We are increasing the operational safety and the efficiency of the procedures.
And if this is Rob Delta again, if I could just tag on to what Jim said, and I'll be pretty brief, but that predictability and that efficiency, from all those tools and processes that you laid out, right? That's about reducing delay and deliver and arriving on time, and that's what our customers are looking for. So that's where we see all these things coming together, is for our customers.
I'm glad you chimed in there, Rob, because I forgot to mention that one of the things that we do at Datacom is we provide the data feed to the airline dispatch centers too. So we are not just exchanging information within the FAA, we're exchanging it with our customers out there too. And that helps make the system more efficient.
Okay, thank you both. Okay, we have a question. Will this impact civil drone unmanned aircraft piloting in any way? That comes from someone who pilots for aerial photography. Unmanned aircraft system, UAS. Jim, I can jump in on that. I would say this project doesn't have any impact on drone operations.
That's correct. We have nothing to do with the, the current UAS effort.
All right. Okay, here's a question we're probably going to need anytime we have a procedure or waypoint, we may want to board up. So thanks to the folks already working on that. Can you move sea salt and deals out over the ocean to keep that air traffic over a minimal amount of land and at a higher altitude when they cut back over land?
I hope with this one, Michael. Cecil and Deals fixes were placed over Biscayne Bay to keep traffic over water as much as possible. If we were to move them further east, then they will be competing the airspace with arrival traffic into Miami, which is at higher altitudes, and want to allow us to climb those departures. The other thing is that with the use of the RNAP of the ground procedures, it's going to be a more predictable path. And as you can see there in the board, with this more predictable path, you won't see that dispersal of tracks that you see going over populated areas like over the water, east of the bay.
Okay, Luis, thank you. So there's always more to the departures, for example, as you said, there are other airports, there are arrival patterns, and so those were all factored into the optimum design. Okay, we have another question here. What was the airline's role in the project? Right, I'll start with that. We may get some other support on the answer, but this is an FAA project. The FAA is responsible for the safe and efficient movement of airplanes through the national airspace system, and we do work closely with industry partners, both airlines and airports, to understand the needs of the airport and the input that they are familiar with from communities as procedures are developed. But we also work with the airlines, who are the operators of the aircraft that fly the procedures. So they own the equipment, they have the flight management systems. They can tell us, for example, if a procedure is flyable, and we look across the airlines at the various fleets that are in use, different types of aircraft that are used across the aviation system. So I'll kind of pause there and see if there are any other comments that anybody wants to offer.
Yes, Michael, this is
Virginia, then Rob. Okay.
I think you've said it very well, Michael. I think you've described our role to the T. Our goal really is to be excellent collaborators in the process with you and the airports to help you achieve that enhanced safety and efficiency, which we all is the objective, I think, for all of us. So our goal is to be right there with you and to support you, and to echo also the needs of the industry as well as of those communities that we serve well with the airports.
Right. Thank you, Virginia. Rob, anything to add?
Not too much. Agree with everything. I would say a large part, and you alluded to this, is making sure that our aircraft can fly these procedures. The first step is obviously to build them to criteria, but different airplanes perform different ways. There sometimes steeper descent angles aren't possible with certain airplanes. So all these things we go into our simulators, we test them, we come back, we rework the procedures, and again, it's a partnership, and we go through the iterations and come up with a workable solution for everybody.
Thanks, Rob. And I mentioned the community, and I don't want to downplay that, but obviously we were out last year in workshops, and we're having workshops like this, the 12 workshops across the study area last week and this week. And we certainly value the input of the community. And I know the airlines have mentioned how they serve the community. The airports view that the same way. So there is an opportunity to comment early in the design process, as well as here we are at the draft environmental assessment. I think we're trying to meet the balance needs and to consider those local factors as well. So definitely a team effort, but it is an FAA project. It's a federal action, which is why we are following the National Environmental Policy Act and publishing documents like the draft environmental assessment. So hopefully you can understand more about the project through workshops like this, ask us questions, and then provide any comments that you have. All right, we have a follow-up to a prior question. It was about flying over low-income areas, eastbound, outgoing. Maybe this was similar to one we just answered, I think, but why not push the path out a couple more miles over the ocean? I feel like that's something we may have touched on. Air traffic, does that sound the same to you?
Yeah, we definitely, we touched on that. But to follow up, we did our best to design these procedures while still being cognizant of the surrounding communities. With that said, we realize the importance of designing a procedure over a body of water, and that's what we tried to do by designing that northbound turn over Biscayne Bay. With that said, by placing these fixes farther to the east, it will make the airspace more complex. Miami's airspace is already very congested. It holds two of the FAA's Core 30 airports in Miami International and Fort Lauderdale, and there's a lot of competing airspace. Having aircraft fly further to the east before turning their turn back to the northwest over the coastline potentially decreases the safety because it increases the workload on the air traffic controller. Thus, that's the reason why moving these fixes farther to the east just don't work. This really was a compromise with us trying to use Biscayne Bay to try to stay away from communities, but still be able to provide a safe air traffic system in South Florida.
All right, Rick, thank you. Okay, we have a question. What kind of feedback did you get from the workshops last year, and were you able to make changes based on that feedback? So I mentioned earlier that we received, it was actually 1,007, I believe, but we received just over 1,000 comments last year across 17 workshops from the Tampa St. Pete area through Orlando down into Palm Beach, Fort Lauderdale, Miami. We reviewed and considered all those before finalizing any of the procedures that were then studied in the draft environmental assessment. So based on public comments we received, we did make several changes, and several of those were in the Miami area. I may ask local air traffic if you want to highlight any of those, but the answer is definitely yes, that input was considered, and we can talk about a few examples.
I will say that definitely we did use that input in our design process. The location of the fixed Cecil is a very good example of that. That was based on input from the community and input from Miami-Dade County Aviation Department. The subsequent fix on the northwest departures, which is deals, that was also modified based on comments from the workshops and input from Miami-Dade Aviation.
And then Jim, I know you mentioned earlier in one of your answers about Virginia Key and some of the routes out that took some flights, I believe, away from kind of that South Miami Beach area, out over water in that area as well.
Right, that's correct. So the discussion about pushing airplanes straight out off the Atlantic coast would probably not make us any friends in Miami Beach. We think that based upon the historic track data, as Ricky and Luis have explained to us, that we've chosen a very equitable solution that would benefit citizens all around on the east side of the airport. I know we haven't talked a whole lot about we've already talked about the east side of the airport. I know we haven't shown much on the west side, but certainly with arrival procedures and departure procedures, we've made changes on the west side of the airport also. So it's not just out to the east side and those more heavily populated areas over there. Is that I don't know, Luis, do you have any comments on that, on what we did out to the west?
Yeah, on the west operation, if you look at the fix Crocs, that fix was modified also based on comments from workshops, and input from Miami-Dade Aviation Department. We try to keep departures as much as we could south of 36th Street, which I believe turns into 41st Street further west. So that's another one where we definitely use input from the community and Miami-Dade Aviation Department.
Thanks, Luis. And Dan, I know we've mentioned Miami-Dade Aviation. I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but obviously sometimes it's not just the airport's perspective, it's the airport reflecting what you've heard from communities and some of the input from some of the insights that the aviation department has from communities. I don't want to make it sound like we're pointing the finger at all. I think you're almost a conduit for community feedback to the FAA. Anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, Michael, we've for many years, the airport has been a part of and hosted a noise abatement advisory board, which provides us input throughout the year and was had a lot of input into what's going on with the Metroplex project as well. So we have constant dialogue with that board, and they've made recommendations, and I think this is all part of it.
All right, Dan, thanks. Okay, we have a question. Have we looked at not just the noise level, but also the frequency of the noise by consolidating the flight tracks? Lisa, you're unmuted. I'm coming back to you.
Okay, I can try to answer that. DNL is used as the FAA's environmental decision-making metric for community noise, as it considers the magnitude, the duration, and frequency of noise events in a 24-hour period. The noise modeling conducted takes into account the greater accuracy of satellite data navigation. And I also would like to add that that it's important to know that the FICAN, Federal Interagency Committee on Noise, and the Federal Interagency Committee on Aviation Noise, that's FICON and FICAN, they both have reports out, and both of them concluded that DNL is the recommended metric for studying aviation noise and should continue to be used as the primary metric for aviation noise exposure. So, you know, I think if I'm not mistaken, our website, we have a report that was issued recently or published recently to Congress on this subject. And if you want more information on that report and want to read the details on, you know, why we use DNL, I would advise anyone to go to our website, faa.gov, and search for that that research. That article is on there, and it has additional information that, you know, if I didn't touch on all the points on why we use DNL, you can go there and get some additional information. Thanks, Michael.
Thank you, Lisa. All right, message to everybody who's viewing the workshop tonight. We're seeing a lot of folks on Zoom and other social media. Keep your questions coming. You can text a question at 949-478-0253, or you can use the Zoom Q&A button or other input from other social media. So again, text direct at 949-478-0253. And we're going to continue to take questions until 5:30. We'll take new questions, and then we may answer a little bit beyond 5:30. So we're going to keep moving through those. Oh, there's going to be some discussion on this one maybe. So why can't you always fly over the ocean versus the land? Caesar, I see you unmuted. Jim, let me start with you, and then we'll go to Caesar.
I was going to suggest that, you know, some pilot and some air traffic input on this might be really good. I mean, I can speak to the larger national airspace system issues, but, you know, there's nothing like hearing it from your own local folks that, you know, tells the story.
Yeah, well, the short answer is we have to take off from an airport and we have to come back and land at an airport. And that's that started the whole thing. You've heard a lot about throughout the whole discussion today about the RNAV procedures, flying off RNAV off the runway and so forth. For the Miami airport, we're going to be operating the aircraft in a really new way. We've been flying, getting vectors and altitude off the runway, and then when the air traffic controller could get us on course, he would give us a turn to that, and then we finally start using the RNAV procedures at that point. With this new procedures, we'll be able to load, and I'll back up a little bit. The busiest time we have as a flight crew is leaving the gate until we get to the cruising altitude, and then on the descent from cruising altitude, top of descent until we're safely back at the gate. There's a lot of stuff going on during those times. The ability, and Rob mentioned to it, Virginia talked about it, Jim has talked about it, to the ability to take all our procedure and basically the path that we're going to fly, both laterally and vertically, and input that into our flight management computer in the airport, in the aircraft, and then being able to fly that off the runway. Yes, it's going to provide for a very precise path, which is what Ricky and Louis have been talking about. When we're going to be able to go over the middle of the bay instead of being spread out all over the places. When we take that northbound departure off of Miami, we will be right over that track. Being able to fly off the runway, we'll be able to accomplish that. It will be more efficient. It will be predictable. And overall, it's going to be a lot safer because we know exactly what we're going to do. We know exactly what we're going to be flying, and we'll be able to do it without having to talk back and forth and all those things. I'll let the rest of the guys jump in.
All right, thanks, Cesar. Rob, did you have anything to add?
Yeah, no, that was a good description. I think specifically to the question, that was regarding flying over the ocean. Obviously, there could be weather that prevents us to flying a route up there, as well as there's aircraft capability. Some can fly over water, some have to hug the shoreline. So, I guess it's unclear from the question whether they were questioning if we could just go over water and go all the way up to New York or something like that, or or design the procedures, within the confines of the water. But I just wanted to add that point.
Thanks, Rob. Did you have anything? I know you mentioned big picture. Anything else to come back to on that one?
Michael, you're a little garbled there, but I can add just a little bit to it. There is an entire offshore structure that runs from the New York area on down off the east coast of the United States down into the Caribbean. There are routes that run across I call it the Gulf of Texas. The Gulf of Mexico, I think, is what other people might refer to it as. And then there's an entire overland route structure that runs from Miami on up into the Atlanta area, into Jacksonville, and then across the entire United States. So it's a complete interconnected system. The bottom line is that it's tied to those runways out there. So they're pointed, east and west, or they're pointed north and south, whatever the case may be. And that's the direction that airplanes have to take off in, and in landing, approach from, in this case, over, certainly over land primarily when you're on east flow. So it's not as easy as just saying, well, send them out all out over the water. It's an entire system that we're working with. And, if it were possible to totally avoid any impacts on anyone, we would be doing that.
All right, we'll continue. Thanks everyone for the team effort on that one. There's a question, a little different direction. Will this affect flight schools and flight patterns for smaller aircraft like a Cessna 172 or a small Piper? And how will this impact operations for GA? Will it affect how pilots have to maneuver in bad weather? So I guess there are a few different questions there.
Michael, I'll try to tackle this one. As far as how it's going to affect smaller aircraft like Cessnas and small Piper planes, it will not affect them. How will it affect maneuvering during bad weather? It will be the same pretty much as we do today. As if we do have bad weather in the South Florida area, we probably will not be able to use these procedures. We're going to have to deviate from them. I do see a positive impact that the general aviation is probably going to see, and that is that with the use of this RNAV of the ground procedures with predictable path, the workload of the air traffic controllers and the amount of transmissions that they're going to have to do is going to significantly be reduced, which will allow them to provide more service to general aviation via traffic calls, practice approaches, and things that today during heavy, busy periods of traffic, we're unable to provide those services because we're so busy with vectoring these aircraft and that workload is going to be significantly reduced with these procedures.
Luis, thank you. There's a question here. Will the procedures implement changes or increase the performance requirements on mid-size or GA airplanes based on the concern of safely maneuvering on departure, especially when the weather's adverse? That kind of ties in a little bit. I don't know if you want to add anything specific on that one, or if there's an industry perspective.
Well, I think a lot of this has to do, I don't think there's any change to the requirements. I think a lot of that has to do with what I spoke about earlier with the sim testing and making sure the equipment can fly these procedures and can fly them safely with the current fleet and aircraft that we have.
Right, so this isn't, and Jim, you may want to weigh in, but this isn't a change where if you don't have this capability, you can't fly into satellite airports in Miami or anything. It doesn't have that impact on GA.
Okay.
It's not a performance requirement that they can't fly, right?
So, and Michael, I think that, general aviation pilots are going to be more impacted by the ADS-B mandate, the 2020 requirement to have, automatic dependent surveillance broadcast in order to operate in controlled airspace than they are by any of these procedures. And that ADS-B mandate, that's a separate issue that's not related to the Metroplex too.
Okay, so no changes on the aircraft equipment that they have from this, and they'll use the same approaches and departures, likely the mid-size and GA aircraft. All right, here's a question. Has there been an environmental assessment that did not conclude in a FONSI or a finding of no significant impact in the last 10 years? So, Lisa, do you have any history on that, or Jim? I see you both unmuted.
I'll give it a shot, and then Jim, you can chime in if you like. I can't say specifically. I know off the top of my head if one was done, but typically, when we get started with developing projects and developing EAs, it's because we are uncertain of the significance of the impacts, and studying them is necessary to make the environmental determination. Now, if the FAA suspects early on in the process that there may be significant impacts associated with a project, and we will do an environmental impact statement, and we call that an EIS. It's completed from the beginning. So, a lot of times the bottom line is a lot of times we just don't know what the impacts are going to be, and we start with doing an EA, and we do that environmental assessment to determine the impacts. And if in fact we can get to a decision that there is no significant impacts, then we issue a FONSI. A FONSI is a finding of no significant impacts. If we can't get to that FONSI, we then take it to the next step and do an environmental impact statement. Jim, I don't know if you want to add anything to that or not.
I can weigh in on some of the question. The answer is no, we haven't done any projects or any Metroplex projects that resulted in anything other than an EA, an environmental assessment, and finding of no significant impact. The reason for that is because where we have found there were significant impacts, we mitigated them. We intentionally want to stay at that level of work that does not drive us to have to do an environmental impact statement. And we think that benefits the citizens around the projects, around the Metroplexes, and is less impactful on, in a bad way, on the system overall. So that's a very astute observation by this questioner. We have not done anything that required anything other than an environmental assessment, and that was intentionally.
You know, that's a good point, Jim. You know, when we're in the middle of these analysis and we're doing the EA, and if we notice that there is a threshold that we're coming really close to, you can redesign. We can do things to mitigate below that level of significance that will keep it, just like Jim said, that will keep it at an environmental assessment as opposed to doing an EIS. It's less of an impact for the community as well. Thanks.
Great point. Thank you both. So if we were doing something like a new runway project, that would typically involve right out of the gate, typically, more often than not, that might involve an environmental impact statement. Maybe not in every case, but a longer runway at a major airport. But Jim, this is the 11th or the last of 11 Metroplex projects around the country. So I know the scope of your answer, I think you said, was Metroplex project, but on the others, we have had environmental assessments. I just want to clarify that's what you were saying.
That's correct, Michael. On all of the others, we have done the environmental assessments, and there have been no environmental impact statements required.
Okay. So there's a question here. Where can I find a hard copy of the environmental assessment near, I believe this is area code 33169. I've checked 2 public libraries, but they didn't have one. So Lisa, I know we have some information on that.
Well, yes, I'm not sure where that zip code is in particular, but if I can direct you to the metroplexenvironmental.com website. And once you go on that website, if you will search South Central Florida Metroplex, search for that under Metroplexes, click on that, and it'll bring you to a page. And on the left side of that page, you'll see an option to choose public input. Oh, good, we can do this right now. Yes, at that page, you see the public input. If you click that link, it should pull up a list of libraries. If you scroll down the page, keep going. Here is a list of libraries where you can find the document available. We provided an electronic copy at all of those airports. All of those libraries where you can review the document.
Right.
And
I can add a little bit to that too. So when Florida went into the phase 1 reopening, I surveyed the library systems of all 117 libraries in the study area, and 64 of them were open. I did spot checks on them, and the couple that I called, and I only called a couple, told me, yeah, I've got that. They had it on flash drive. We, even a little bit further, if this is a Miami area library we're talking about, we contacted the head librarian for Miami, for 6 airports in the immediate vicinity of the airport, and she assured us that she would ensure that her libraries had the electronic copy available. So if perhaps if we asked for the hard copy, there might be a misunderstanding. They couldn't get the electronic copy. If that library doesn't have it, then get a hold of us. And I think that information is on the website too. On our it should be on our contact point on our environmental assessment, Metroplex environmental website, and we'll make sure that that library gets an electronic copy of the EA.
Thanks, Jim. Thanks,
Thanks.
Lisa. And then online with the link that's right there on the screen, not only is there a list of libraries, but that link for documents takes you right to the environmental assessment. If you're looking for online access and you happen to have that, I mean, if you're at this point or if you're at the library just on their computers, that documents link will take you where you can see the various content of the environmental assessment in that form. So it's another option.
Right, and I'm not mistaken, we also provide an address on the website here that where they can contact us, and we'll make sure that they can get an electronic copy of it.
Right, thanks, Jim. Okay, we have another question. How come there were no noise points studied on the west side of Miami Beach and the other coastal cities that will be affected by the eastern and northern flight route? Right, Lisa, we may need to show on the tool, but.
Yeah, we can show on the tool, but basically, you know, we looked at more than 210,000 US Census data in this tool, and in the areas of low population, well, you know, they have less census blocks. So within those areas, it was determined, noise modeling was, the noise model was determined at 117,000 points. So I don't know, I think we have an address we can pull in that area. And we're typing that address in now. And at that address, we do have, it is showing some data points around. Those data points are typically a half nautical mile intervals across that area. But again, the data was pulled from the census blocks, and you know, the lower populated area just had less census blocks. I guess that's the best way to answer that. If anybody else has anything to add, jump in there.
Lisa, all I would say from what I've seen, they're on a half nautical mile grid, and the dots are almost like you have more points in heavily populated areas, but you have a pretty consistent grid everywhere throughout the entire study area, the southern half of Florida.
That's right. That's right. In certain areas, it's heavily populated, and so the block data is, you know, there's more block data. When less populated area, the census blocks are a little bit
right,
smaller. So, but for that area, there's a good amount of data there. So I would encourage you to go back and search that tool and look around in that area. And if you're having an issue with the actual tool and pulling up this information, I think there's a help on that site that you can click on to get some additional help with that tool. Thanks, Michael.
Hey,
There
Michael,
it is.
Can
Sorry.
I do just a quick follow-up on the prior question about the EA? There is a contact tab on that Metroplex environmental site. I just checked it out, and I can see we need to change the name of the person who's on there. But there is an email address, and there's also an address at the Eastern Service Center for the environmental specialist for the project. And if you contact us, if you cannot find an electronic copy, you cannot find a copy, contact us and we'll make sure you get one.
Lisa, can you tell us which one was the base year for the no action? I think that's important to address that question.
I'm sorry, say that again.
The base year for the noise contours.
The base year was 2017.
Okay.
So we did, and let me see if I can help with that. I think the analysis looked at historic tracks from 2017 to 2018, but we looked at the forecast to show the difference between the procedures proposed for the project in 2021 and also in 2026.
26,
I'm not
correct.
sure which of those you were looking at, Norman, but hopefully that's helpful.
That's very helpful to address the question. Yes, thank you.
Okay. You're welcome.
Right, we'll continue. We've seen lots of east flow routes and commented, can you show information on for west flow? So maybe we could pull up the west departure boards and share a little bit on that from an air traffic perspective. I know that's a little bit, I don't know, and there's some videos. So as you guys are thinking about that, we have videos on the workshop website that if you missed those, obviously you can walk back and get a narrated version, but maybe there are a couple highlights we can show here. Rick, Luis, anything to add on? I'm not sure exactly what they're looking for. So this actually depicts those west flow departures.
So Ricky mentioned that in the video at the beginning. This is going to be the west operation. There's basically the traffic departing to the west and to the south of Miami Airport will go to the fixed casino, and traffic departing to the northwest, northeast, and north of Miami will be going via Crux and those procedures attached to it. Just want to point out, currently at Miami, we use a heading of 270. And then we're authorized to use the heading of 290 during periods of heavy traffic or because of weather conditions. With these procedures, instead of using the 290, the fixed croc, which we position based on input from workshops and also in collaboration with Miami-Dade Aviation Department, that's going to be a heading further south of the 290 heading, which I believe I mentioned before is going to keep the departures south of 36th Street, which turns into 41st Street for a longer period of time during industrial areas. Same thing with the south departures. We delayed the turn to the south until west of the turnpike, trying to keep these departures over industrial areas as much as possible.
Luis, thank you for that. Looks like we have two more questions. So here's one. I'm seeing FAA and industry. How can the community be part of the process? All right, I can start with that. We touched on a little bit on that. This is our second set of workshops. We did 4 workshops in the Miami area last year, early in the design process, took feedback as we outlined earlier. We also worked with the airport, the Noise Abatement Advisory Board, and we're welcoming your comments through this comment period that opened on May 11th. It's open until July 10th. We'd love to hear from you. Please comment. You can go to floridametroplexworkshops.com and click on the comment tab. As we've mentioned, I think on the workshop, and others may want to chime in, a lot of times the airport with their noise efforts, they're aware of where their noise sensitivities or where their areas that they have a history of comments regarding noise. And we also work with the airlines, the airport, the carriers, et cetera. And we've heard from some of them tonight about how they serve the community in and around Miami. So I'm not sure if anybody wants to add anything to what I said, but the best way is to participate in the workshop, to ask questions, make sure that you understand what we're proposing in the project, and then provide comments back to us. That's your channel of feedback to us. Any other thoughts from the panel? Jim, I see you unmuted, but you're not saying anything.
It's a good thing I didn't say anything inadvertently, too.
All right. So one other point I'll mention, and we highlighted them a little bit earlier, but there were several changes made specifically here in the Miami area based on the feedback in those workshops. Comments directly taken into account that helped make this a better project. So we appreciate the comments, and we continue to welcome this engagement with you all. So we have one other question. When do you forecast this Metroplex to become operational? Jim, you've got that?
I think I can handle this one. So we would expect to start a phased implementation, and that means that we'll have more than one date that we use. likely in the spring of 2021, around April timeframe, on into the fall of 2021. Publication cycles run on 56, it's a 56-day cycle. So there's a date in April, and we know that there are a couple other dates on through the summer that we'll be targeting. Of course, I want to emphasize, there's no decision made on this project yet. So it's a process. We have to complete the environmental assessment and determine that there are no significant impacts, and then obtain a record of decision from an FAA executive level. And that will be the official decision on the project.
Great, thank you, Jim. And that's a great note to end on. So that brings us to the end of this afternoon's workshop. I want to thank everybody for participating, for asking some good questions. I hope our answers were informative. I want to thank all the specialists for providing expertise, our entire FAA communications team, and everybody who supported this workshop in the background. I also want to especially acknowledge our industry participants tonight who joined us. I know I keep saying tonight, I guess we're getting close. Late this afternoon, everybody who contributed your perspectives in the discussions. So thank you to you. As a reminder, one last time, your questions today are not part of the legal record for the draft environmental assessment. So to comment for the record, please go to the comments tab on the website, floridametroplexworkshops.com. You can also email us or send us a written comment, and those addresses are also on the comments tab on this same website. A reminder, the comment period is open until July 10th of 2020, and as Jim shared, after the comment period closes, the FAA will consider and review all substantive comments received during the comment period. The agency expects to issue an environmental determination in September 2020. The workshop this afternoon has been recorded. It should be available for playback on the website tomorrow if you want to refer back to any of the discussion from today, or share it with friends, neighbors, and family members. We'll also host another live workshop for Miami tomorrow, Wednesday, June 10th at 6 p.m. and one additional on Thursday, June 11th at noon. So that concludes our workshop today, and I want to thank everybody again for joining us.